No.
Could I just add one item, Robyn?
Yeah.
And I'm not quite sure where it would go, probably new business. Just an update on a phone conversation council had yesterday with BC Housing.
Okay. Okay, I've got it in my notes here. Okay, anything else? No? Okay, so could we have somebody to move the agenda? Yeah, thank you, Ron. Second. I'm gonna make Maureen put her hand up. There, Maureen can second. Perfect. All in favor, moving the agenda. Yep, excellent, moved. Okay, adoption of the minutes. So our July 5th minutes. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review them.
I've got a couple of typos.
Okay, yeah.
All right, under business arising, point number 2, I think the one phrase should read, have a rental.
Right, have our rental. Yep.
Okay. And also under business arising, point number 9, the word secondary is misspelled. There should be an E in there, an A in there.
Or an A.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other comments on the minutes? No. Okay, can we have somebody to move the minutes? Thank you, Maureen. Second is Ron. Everybody in favor? Yep. All right, there we go. And it's approved. And public comments. Steph, I'm assuming we don't have any public comments. Excellent. Right on to our delegation 4.1. Welcome, Rob Purdy. Thank you so much for joining us. At our last meeting, we had thought it would be a great idea to have some local developers and people who are actually doing things on Bowen come and talk to our housing advisory committee and let us know what are some of the challenges, what are some of the opportunities. And I think you have a list of questions that was generated from that. So let's just dive right in.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for the invite. And it's too bad I'm the only one here. I assume invites went out to more than just me. So
we're just having one at a time. Yeah.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah, because we have a few other things on our agenda. And so we thought we'd just have one person at a time. So yeah, feel free to watch future videos. I think we'll be having a couple more subsequent meetings.
Oh, good. That's good to hear. So I can just jump right into it. I think I know most of you and you're familiar with my background. But I'd probably correct local developer is my definition. I know I'm building a project right now, but really I'm a finance person. I work in Vancouver doing a lot of housing projects. I've worked with a nonprofit quite closely. And now I have my own company that finances housing projects and specifically non-market housing and rental housing throughout BC. And also it's starting to kind of creep into other provinces as well. So my expertise is really on the finance side. My experience on Bowen, actually building a project as the owner is the first, and it might be the only building I'll do that on. I saw it came out of a need in our community and the need for rental housing. And it was just kind of I was aware of funding that was available to do it. So it was really more opportunistic to get it built. And as a result, I think I now have a developer title, but it's, I'm not planning to build more and more and more myself. So why don't I go through the project or the questions that Steph sent me just one by one, given that last comment, there's a couple of them are sort of not applicable to me, but I'll go through them anyways.
And feel free to go off on tangents if they prompt some other thoughts. It's really just an opportunity for us to hear from somebody who's, has experience, especially very recent experience building on Bowen, and then also your knowledge just generally of affordable housing and what we, like I say, what challenges and opportunities exist. So feel free to go off book.
Great. So the first question, what are your thoughts on housing on Bowen? My main thought is that there's just more diversity that's needed. It's an issue everywhere, and that's not just rental housing, that's including non-market housing. There's all different terms used, but we have a lot of single family homes. That's no secret. It doesn't account for different stages of life. We tend to talk about different economic circumstances, but stages of life are quite important. Throughout my life, I've lived in small, like a 200 square foot apartment, and I've lived in a townhouse, and I've lived in now a single family home, and then there will be a point where I don't want to live here anymore because it's just not, it doesn't meet my needs and downsize. So we don't have housing, we don't have much housing that allows for the transition between those different phases and different living circumstances. So I think diversity is needed, and not just diversity on economic circumstances. That's important as well, but the different life stages tends to get, I think, lost in the discussion. So then that's where that happens. I think using what's already built on Bowen is a really good starting point. There's a lot of properties on the island that have secondary buildings, and there's creative uses for what's already built. That's the quickest way to get diversity, is just open that up to existing property owners to allow different uses and more creative uses, because I know they're out there. There's a lot of little cabins on this island, and that helps people who want to live there, and it also helps, it makes the island more affordable for buyers too, because if you have a stream of income off your property, you can help deal with the crazy home prices that exist right now, which is something that at a municipal level we can't do a whole lot about. It's a market thing, and it's a government thing, but at different levels. So just being able to use what's here, I think, would be a really good starting point. So
yeah. And Rob, do you have any specific examples of what's hindering that at the moment? Like, is it the regulations or some limitations? Like, I know for example, secondary detached dwellings can only be built on 0.9 or above. So like, that's one thing we as a committee have identified. So allowing different smaller lot sizes. Are there any other specific examples you think are hindering that?
I think that's a good one. I think if it's 0.9 or it's an acre or
0.9 of an acre
threshold feels somewhat arbitrary. I think a lower threshold would, there's a lot of properties like between half an acre and an acre that could easily fit like a coach house or a smaller dwelling. I think bringing that down would probably open up some opportunities, and it would make sense for people to build. One thing it's tricky outside of the Cove, and it's not really a municipal issue, or municipally controlled, is water and sewage. As water under the Drinking Water Protection Act, as soon as you connect or make a second connection on your well, you're now a water system. So that's being conscious of that. I think that scares a lot of people away. The cost to do that, I've done that. It was about $50,000 to deal with that water system that has to get installed if you're on your own well or own water source, and you're not under either a municipal source, or there are some shared water systems on the island that are already sort of under watch by the VCH and Drinking Water Protection Act. But that's a concern, or it would be a concern. I think if you lower that threshold and are starting to see lots of applications for smaller coach houses or secondary dwellings, the Drinking Water Protection Act becomes a thing. I think it's a real hurdle to do that a lot of people aren't maybe aware of, and you find out during the process, because the threshold for being defined as a water system in British Columbia is quite low, being 2 connections, as opposed to, I think, other provinces have higher thresholds than that. So more of a consideration, but I think it's something that will become or would be very topical in that discussion for owners if you give them the freedom to build something else. And then sewerage regulations too. A lot of homes were built with one house in mind when they put in their septic fields. When you're expanding that's a consideration, and something that I think can snag people. And if there's an easy way to navigate both of those, or at least some guidance, that would be helpful. And I know both those are regulated provincially, but there'll be considerations. And yeah, I think that's sort of good for the first question, just on general thoughts. You guys have any questions or comments?
I have a question, and it's not so much for you, Rob, it might be for Daniel. With the people who have put in detached secondary suites to date, how have they navigated the water system regulations and sewerage? Have they experienced a great deal of difficulty? Do they do it on their own?
I mean, generally they're putting in a second septic field to deal with the detached secondary suite. I think we may have had some where they've built both together, so they're able to combine the septic system on the same property. But I'm not sure actually. And then in terms of water, yeah, I mean, coastal health will say if you've got two connections, you're a water system. So some of them, you know, may have been already on a municipal water system or already on a private water system. And so they're just another connection to the system. And in other cases, yes, they're doing this whole additional step to meet coastal health requirements.
Mhm.
Are either of you aware of any movement at the provincial level to raise the threshold from 2 to something else?
No, it seems stuck at 2, and it's a low threshold. I personally wrote to Jordan Sturdy a while ago to ask the question, and I didn't get any response, which kind of made me assume that it's not a topical thing at the moment. So, because it is quite stringent, and it's just one of those things. It does any house that's not on a, like Daniel said, not on a municipal water system, and you're on your own water source. You'll probably trip that regulation when you put in a second connection, and it's a bit of a gotcha in the process that'll probably be difficult for those homeowners to navigate, and the cost is substantial. Like I said, it's probably 30 to 50 grand depending on sort of your circumstances, I guess, and your ability to navigate the process. So
we have a series of meetings coming up on Monday, conference calls with provincial ministers. So this is very helpful, Rob, and it's something that we can bring up with the relevant minister. So that it is a potential impediment to expanding the housing base on that one.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think it is applicable to other small communities, other rural communities. So it's not just a Bowen thing because it is a provincial regulation. It would be applicable to any other small communities. It's being enforced kind of selectively. So it depends on your health. Like we have Vancouver Coastal here, but it depends on your health region and how they choose to enforce it. So it may differ from community to community, but it would be the same issue across the province. So I do think it's a barrier for communities like ours that's not really discussed too much until you get into the process. Then that's when you kind of realize what you're going to have to go through. So,
Rob, what fraction of homes on Bowen Island are on their own well rather than part of the municipal system?
it's a good question. I don't know, for Daniel, I'd guess like a third, maybe. I don't know.
Not many.
That would be my guess too, because I go, well, we have 1,900 homes and there's 600 on Cove Bay. I would have to then add up the others, but you know, a third sounds about right.
Mhm. And then one comment, it just came to mind, kind of a bit of a tangent, but just it's just now having lived here for 8 years and been involved in a few things, is just the resources on the island. I know it's a topical discussion, but the resources on the island, so water, and we're limited, and that versus population on the island. I do believe that there's basically unlimited demand for housing over here. Whatever you build will just continue to get filled and filled and filled, no matter what you build. If it's below market housing, non-market, rental, single family homes, townhouses, anything, there's I would say it's unlimited demand. So then it becomes important not to build more, like doing this through just supply, which is just building more and more and more. Well, actually, I don't think improve things at all. I don't think we're not big enough to influence market prices for homes or rental prices. Those are driven by a wider market that we don't control. So it becomes important to build what's needed on the island, and making sure that what gets built, which is different forms or different types of housing, or that hit different economic circumstances, like I was saying, and be very selective about what gets built. Otherwise, I think we could just fill up the island with more people and stretch resources without actually meeting a need that we have in the community. So I think that's an important thread through the whole discussion. So
Great.
I'll go to the second question. What do you want and how can we help get you there? So back to my earlier comment, I'm not actually planning to build anything else over here or probably elsewhere. But what I can say is the process for the rental building that we're doing was actually really good. So more, more of that for others would be great. And what I say for that is the things that really helped us was the site was pre-zoned. So we didn't have to go through a zoning. So you zoned it for what you wanted there. So we didn't have to go through that process. The building permit application process was by a long shot the quickest I've ever seen in any municipality for this type of project when we went through it. The development permit process was well thought out without layering onerous requirements onto the project. That's typical in other municipalities. So that my experience going through permitting for this rental project was really good. So I would just say for the projects that you're doing for others, just more of the same, to be honest. It's we have the benefit of not being a large bureaucracy and things. I can go and talk to Daniel or go and talk to Greg Cormier and work through things. That's very helpful. That doesn't exist in obviously the bigger municipalities, but even a lot of the smaller ones. So,
Rob,
yeah.
Can you be more specific about why, and it's only because this is going to come up later for us in our meeting, why was pre-zoning such an advantage? Like, I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear it from you. From you as a developer, somebody who's looking to do something, what were the advantages of the pre-zoned land?
Time and certainty. For our project, we got our funding through the federal government, not funding, but financing. There was no grant funding, but in order to do that, they needed certainty that the approvals process, or basically we're allowed to build what we want to build on that site. To go through a rezoning, you wouldn't have confirmation of your financing until that's complete, or there's at least like a third reading on the site. They would give you a conditional commitment, but they wouldn't move past that. So it gave us certainty. And then on time, we had no carrying costs. So we bought the site on a Friday and we started building on Monday. There was a bit of coordination in the background to make that happen, but the being able to do that, there's no carrying costs for the land, which can be significant. There's other projects I've been involved with on the financing side where the owner, whether it's sometimes a nonprofit or if it's a private owner, would own the land for 2 or 3 years with no income on the land and usually a mortgage on the land, and that cost goes right into the pro forma, which makes it more expensive to build. I think disconnecting the pro forma, so there's the cost of the project and then there's the value of what you're building. The cost actually doesn't flow through to the value. Like you can't, there's a limit. You can't pass that on to the end user. The end user is the market basically. So what happens as the cost goes up, if you hit a threshold where your carrying cost is too high and the pro forma costs get too high, you cancel the project. So that's, so having this certainty on the financing side helped. So pre-zoning is huge, very smart to do that. I'd suggest doing that on others. And I don't know how, I haven't been too close to your project, Robyn, but if that, I don't know if it's in place to have that density there or not. But pre-zoning helps a lot. So
Great, thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, please continue. If there's any other thoughts, or we can go on to the next question.
Oh yeah, I'll go on to 3. So what ideas have you considered but have not brought forward? I had one idea and it's getting built. So it's that's yeah, I haven't been brainstorming other ideas to do myself over here, but just being involved in the community, you start forming opinions and thoughts on different things. But other than that, there's nothing that hasn't been brought forward. One for one. So, what are you interested in building? Same comment. What do you see that can be improved? I don't know. We just went through some comments on that. I do go back to just housing diversity, improving I don't know if it's I guess it's the land use bylaw, but I can only speak to my personal experience, but going back to if you have a secondary dwelling, I find the land use bylaw confusing, the definitions in it. They're mostly more for like temporary uses, but how you handle that dwelling is confusing, I find, when I review the land use bylaw, if you want to use it for something, whether it's short-term or long-term. I can give you an example of, not to dive into like personal circumstances, but it is an experience where we actually have a dwelling at our house where the previous owners lived in it for a decade. But if I wanted to rent that to somebody, I would be going through a building permit process, because I have to define the secondary dwelling as a residence. I don't know the exact terms, but I've been told that I would be going through a building permit process, even though I'm not doing any construction. It's just to change the definition of that building or the use of that building. So that's just an example, just that I've come across in my personal circumstances, and that would be a building permit for no construction. It's just a change of use or something like that. So what we've done in our circumstances is it's just offline. It's just not being used, which isn't a great use. And I'm only saying that because I know there's others in similar circumstances. So it's just, I would say, an example is how those secondary dwellings get defined. The existing ones, not the new ones, are easier to go through the process. But in our circumstance, it was something that was built before incorporation, and so it's sort of how that gets made legal to be used seems to be a tricky process to navigate. We've personally chosen at this point not to navigate it because it seems onerous.
Well, to jump in with an example, I remember a number of years ago in the city of Vancouver, they recognized that there was a lot of illegal basement suites, and there probably still are. And so I remember they made a fairly drastic change at one point to try and make an attempt just to make them safe, so that it was basically, you had to meet I don't know, 6 criteria. There was sort of smoke alarms, a safe exit, minimum ceiling heights of 6'4" or something. Like, they just basically tried to take it down to the bare minimum so they could at least get those suites to what they felt was a safe point, even if it wasn't completely compliant with code. They just acknowledged that there was all of these suites, and they just kind of wanted to at least bring them up to some level and legalize them and make sure people were safe and all of those things. So that just came to mind when you said it. I wonder if there's an opportunity to say, hey, there's all these there's several existing buildings around the island that, like yours, are not being occupied because you just can't be bothered to go through all the rigmarole of it. Maybe there's a way that we can kind of do a simplified fast track, that maybe it does, because it won't meet current building code, but can it meet, these 6 or 10 or whatever safety points to make it safe for it to be habitable, and then you can rent it out. So that's just an idea, an example that came to mind.
Yeah, like the quickest way to create housing is use what you have. We always discuss it in what should we build, but if we can use what we have, and I know there's lots of places around the island, and there is sort of this elephant in the room of how do those, because a lot of them were built a while ago when building code was different and there wasn't a municipality, and so how that gets matched up to the current environment where there is a local municipality and land use bylaw and building code has changed. How to reconcile that is it's not an easy task, I don't think, but to have some way to make those available, because I feel like people would like to use their space, or to use it kind of above board, I guess, like you were saying, like where they're like acknowledge that there's a lot of places being rented that maybe don't fit, and instead of making people feel bad about renting those out, try and work with them to make it like kosher to do that, and make it, like you said, address the practical side, which is probably safety and making sure that it is good living circumstances for whoever's living there. I think that's important, because Bowen's kind of a hodgepodge of all different stuff over time. So
Exactly.
just acknowledging that and trying to work within that. And I know that needs to be reconciled with existing bylaws and code and everything. So finding a way to do that would be, I think, useful. So
I have a question for Daniel. When the detached secondary suites bylaw was in development, we all recognized that hodgepodge, and that there would be questions about grandfathering that came up. Is there anything that you can say in response to Rob's comments? What would a building permit process look like for the place that he has on his property that is perfectly livable, but not, by the sounds of things, legally livable? Any thoughts, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, something we've come up with a lot, probably the last year, and in particular since we permitted short-term rentals and residential guest accommodations, and they get caught at the business license stage. So before, if you had a secondary suite in your house, unless you sort of went out of your way to try to legalize it, it's like, well, it was allowed in zoning and you never got a building permit for it, and it just exists. And now we're checking them in terms of when you come to get a business license as a short-term rental, we say, okay, was it a licensed suite? Is it safe for people to stay in? So we have on our website, what we've done is done a permit for an existing secondary suite. So for ones when they're inside the house, and we sort of have a list of what we're looking for, which I think is 8 things, and a separate application form. And and we sort of said, well, we're assuming that it'll be this much work, so the fee is this much, as opposed to, well, when we typically ask for like construction value of what they've done, and they say, well, I'm not doing anything, and we say, well, you did something in the past, because before, we had the plans from when your house was permitted in 2005 or something, and there's no kitchen, there's no something, so clearly something happened at some point without a permit. And so we say, well, we'll estimate the construction value as this. So that's for existing like secondary suites within homes is a way to license them. The detached ones get trickier in terms of then we're always trying to look in the property file and say, okay, what was permitted there? And in some cases, it's like, well, they built 2 houses on the property in the 50s before we had any zoning. And so it's like, okay, we'll maybe assume that they were built with permits. We don't have any records. We don't have anything. It gets trickier when something was built, like the 80s or 90s. And we're like, okay, at the time, the zoning just allowed 1 dwelling. So you were permitted 1 dwelling. And now it's adding the dwelling. And I don't remember, Rob, the details of yours. And I don't know if I would go into it too during a meeting, but in general, people run into encounters with, water. Is there septic? The big one is, does it have to qualify for HBO as a new dwelling? Because if you build an accessory building, it's not a dwelling. You don't need to get a home warranty for it. And then if you add a kitchen, you say, well, now it's a dwelling. It's intended to be a dwelling. Well, now it needs a home warranty.
Mm-hmm. So it's that like train of dialogue, which is all correct. But it's that like, if you're a homeowner that has those 2 buildings that were built in the 50s, and they go and talk to you, and that's the response, and it's all correct. Like there is code for water and sewage and building and permits and like local stuff. But that it's that sort of thing that's like, actually, I'm not going to bother. Like that's the result. And I don't know. That's where I said it's complicated. But if there's a way to deal with those houses where there's 2 sitting there, they were both built in the 50s, from a practical perspective, they're both totally fine. But you're just kind of caught in this web of legislation and code. I don't know, maybe it's not possible, but it's there's definitely a lot of existing dwellings on the island that are usable, I would say. But that's just speaking from like a practical standpoint, not from a legal standpoint. So I don't know what the answer is, but maybe it's
okay.
issuing the
You don't have to
challenge
come up
see
with
if
them. That's the great thing. We can just
Yeah.
put ideas out there.
Yeah,
We're
there's
just
not
here to
a simple
yeah.
answer to it. So it's more
Yeah.
of a challenge to see if it's
Yeah.
possible, because that saves constructing new buildings. It's really expensive to build on Bowen, no matter what you're building. So usually the economics of like, if you're going to rent something, is it worth building? The answer 8 out of 10 times is going to be no. It's not worth building. So if you can bridge that with existing what's already built, the cost of building that is substantially better, just using what's here, because the construction costs are a lot. I know from the rental project, it's probably at least 25-30% over the city, on average, I'd say. So it's expensive. Materials are expensive, labor is expensive, hard to find. So the math on whether you would actually bite something off to do it doesn't, I don't think, pencil for most people, because rents, I know we say rents are high here, but rents are actually lower on Bowen than they are in most of Metro Vancouver. So that versus costs are higher, substantially higher. Rents are, I don't know, call it a quarter lower than Vancouver. I don't know if that's exactly right, but that squeezes the decision. And then not too many people kind of decide to delve in and actually take the risk and go through the process to do it. So using what we have would be great. So
Absolutely.
I'll go to the last question, just conscious of time. Please provide an update on recent projects and plans, including timelines. So you can see the progress on ours. I'll be seeing Daniel soon to start talking about occupancy. So we're pushing towards occupancy on our project, and hopefully November we'll have people in there, but we'll see how it goes. It's a lot more finished inside than it is outside. So our top floor, all the flooring went in this week. All the cabinets are in. We're doing our final painting and all of that, and working our way down. So I would say from a, like, again, practical standpoint, the top floor is probably livable in about a week from now. And then we're just working our way down. So it's a lot more finished inside than out. Now we're finally getting our roof put on, so it's going to start getting cleaned up, but we're hoping 2 more months of construction and then we're finished up. So that's the progress on that. So.
That's great.
Do you know, Rob, like at one point I was hearing, sort of updates from David on how many tenants were interested.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you'd sent out sort of looking for more firm inquiries. Do you like sort of have an idea of how many people were actually then firmed up to be interested to have a unit?
A lot more than we have units. So
Yeah.
There's significant demand for rental over here. I would say, I want to say we're close to 100% of our list is what I'd call locals. The discussion of what a local came up at the start, and I've defined it as just personally as somebody that's currently living here or currently working here. So they may be commuting to the island to work. And I would say our list is made up entirely of that. I don't think if we have any off-island applicants, they're very small, and we'll be housing locals with it. But the demand is significantly higher than what we're delivering. So there's need for more. There's also need for exactly what Robyn's doing, because there's different types of rental projects. Ours is a market rental project, and for the most part, there's a few units in it that it would be considered affordable, but overall it's mostly a rental project. And then what Robyn's doing on the non-market side is fantastic and needed. And what I've seen on who's applied to our project, there's definitely a need for what Robyn's doing over here. So keep up the good work, and hopefully hopefully that gets off the ground. It's too bad it's really beholden to provincial or federal funding. So that's the everything else from what I've seen is a great project, and going back to kind of predefining the use, vending in land at a nominal cost is like the local government is doing kind of everything that it can from what I've seen, and doing a good job. It's now down to just because the project does need grant funding. Non-market housing typically needs a grant if you want to really achieve low rents, and it's kind of just waiting for that grant award. So nice work applying for everything, and it will come through.
Yeah, we'll keep chipping away at it.
Yeah. So, but that's definitely needed. You'll have a full building on the first day you rent it, I guarantee. So.
Oh, I'm sure. We already have people inquiring as to where the wait list is and what applications they can fill out. So
yeah, exactly. It's definitely needed, and non-market is needed across the board. One of the biggest issues we have in Metro Vancouver is most of the land, almost, I think it's like 98 or 99% of the land is privately owned. As opposed to being in the hands of municipal government or nonprofits, or what I'd consider non-market, where you don't have that drive to sort of increase prices with the market. Detach from the market is a thing that's needed on a lot of housing projects. So good job so far.
Michael, your hands up?
Yeah, Rob, firstly, thank you. Whoever's idea it was to bring people like Rob on to this meeting, all I can say is tick that box, because it's been extremely illuminating. Rob, I just want to check a couple of things to make sure that I'm hearing you right, because you made some remarks that really stuck with me. Firstly, work with what you've got as a sentence, I think, and let's work on creative uses to enable us to work with what we've got more effectively. Have I summarized that bit correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously then it gets into smaller lot size. We get into details, smaller lot size, water, sewer, etc. The expression you used, unlimited demand, I think that is unbelievably relevant, because we can spend a lot of time and effort, and we need to do this, and I think we've probably done it on surveys about demand. But the fact is, we have, whatever we're doing on this island of ours, we have probably a demand that exceeds any potential supply. And I think, Rob, you'd agree that I've got that one around the throat. It's that's how it is, right?
Yes.
You mentioned another takeaway I've got from you is aging. What we are looking at here with our collection of single family homes, some of them of considerable size. By the way, it's not just the house size, it's the property size itself. Maintaining a house once it's in good shape is one thing. Constant maintaining of grounds, gardens, and everything else is quite another matter too. So the aging issue, I think, is particularly relevant. So hopefully on some of these properties, this ties in well with working with what we've got, because a lot of people, and you alluded to it, and you're younger than I am, but I've got friends who are sort of moving out and moving to places and desperate to find somewhere smaller. How they yearn for I don't know, shall we say 1,500 square foot house with on one level with very little care. So I think we're on the same page that this aging, it's not just the people looking for rental. We have an issue with an aging population looking to basically downsize. I mean, is that something you would concur with?
100%. And that's where there's kind of two considerations. There's just life stages, and then there's economic circumstances. I think economic circumstances gets, it's got the spotlight, but there's also just life stages. And that's not just aging, that's also early on when you're single and you want to live here. Like if you're in your 20s and you want a place to live on Bowen, and you're on your own, you're probably not going to buy a single family home. You're probably looking for something else, and you may not want to rent. You may want to buy something that's kind of meets your life stage. So being able to address that, and I just know from like personally, since we've been here, I've bought 2 houses, and both of them were from people who left the island because they were getting older and wanted to be closer to services, and I think their needs weren't being met locally. So I've just seen that in my scenario, and I think that's quite common once you hit a certain age over here. So
Yeah, I mean, take myself, I've had several offers to buy our home. So the immediate question is, sure, I'll sell you our home now. Can you find us somewhere to live? And it's amazing that tends to deter it. Lastly, Rob, since you mentioned it, just the financial issue is inescapable. I just want to, I concur with what I hear and what I know, is that basically on Bowen, compared to roughly the metro area, we're talking round numbers, a figure of 25-30% more to build on Bowen than in the metro region. Is that, I mean, that's figures people can understand. Is that being truthful and not telling? That is about what it is. It's 25 or 30% more to build on Bowen.
it's tough for like a blanket statement because there's different forms of construction.
I realize.
So when I'm saying that, I'm just on multifamily, and my experience is, and it's again in the city, it's sort of hard to say blanket. Like if you're building in Langley or Abbotsford, it's very different than if you're building at Main and 6th.
Yeah.
So, but overall, there's a premium on materials here. Everything from concrete, lumber, drywall, just like concrete, the price over here is almost double what it is in the city. Everything else has to be transported over here. Like we've had our trusses came over and the tide was too high. That ended up costing us something like $5,000 for the truck to wait there until the tide went down. So there's things like that you don't really factor in, and labor as well. There's some great trades over here, but for certain types of projects, the volume doesn't exist. Like we have a crew of, I think we had like 15 drywallers in there at once. We just can't find that locally. So yeah, I would say multifamily is probably 25% is if you want to use a rule of thumb. And then on the revenue side, the rental, and I know it seems like it may be high over here, but it's probably $2 to $2.50. It's a square foot over here, where in Vancouver it's closer to $4. So those both just affect the economics. It squeezes pro formas and makes them incredibly hard to work over here. So
I mean, as you said, Rob, rents were here about 25% lower than they are again generally.
Generally, that would be to like central Vancouver, in the city. And then, despite your best intentions, if you do want to build something, most people have to go to the bank to pay for it. And even if you have the best intentions to build something, you'll hit a roadblock when you go and try and get it financed. So the economics just need to work in order for a project to get off the ground. So.
No, I recognize that, but I think clarifying these points and being able to say, it's a bit as how long is a piece of string, but nevertheless, as a bit of a guiding light, as a goalpost, that's incredibly relevant. And something I've been in this discussion for a long time, and when it comes to building rental properties here, it is absolutely, I mean, it's horrible. That's why we don't have them, and that's why I think your opening remark about working with what we've got is so incredible. It is so incredibly relevant, and plus working with people and with Robyn. And trusting that, someone will extend a hand so her project can reach fruition. But those are not easy. Those are not easy fiscal parameters to work with. And I think it's good that. Thank you for coming here, because it's simple clarity which enables our thinking going forward and stops us going down rabbit holes sometimes. So thank you very much, Rob. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I'm just watching the time, and we should probably wrap up unless there's some really urgent final questions, but it'd be good to keep moving along and let Rob go and get on with the rest of his day. Thank you so much for joining us. And
thanks for the invite.
Yeah, it was
really so
really valuable.
Figure all this out. It's not
easy.
Really
valuable feedback. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
See you later.
Thanks, Rob.
Bye-bye. Thank you. So the next, I think that was incredibly useful. So the next item on our agenda is an update from Councillor Nicholson on 5.1. So the joint meeting that we had last month.
Yeah.
Or July.
So my update will be brief. As you know, part of the outcome of the joint meeting was the development of a request for expressions of interest for a portion of the community lands on Lot 1. The draft expression of interest went to council. It was approved by council. So the expectation is that the request will go out into the public in the coming week or so. Is that still comfortable for you, Daniel? Because I think you have still a final look at the EOI.
I think that works. I haven't connected with Liam on it since I've been back and he's been back.
Okay. So I chatted with Liam and he was just, I think, gonna confirm. So what this is an open call for creative responses for uses on that land. And the respondents can be community organizations, nonprofits, private developers, or a partnership of that group. And I think the deadline is still being established, and Liam and Daniel will sort that out. But going out into the public, and we'll see what we have in response to it. Are there
That's
any
wonderful.
questions? Any questions?
Thanks, Maureen. No, presumably if people wanted to have a look at the EOI, if they didn't have a look at it before, it would be included in a council meetings agenda. Am I correct? If people wanted to have a look at that draft?
It was reviewed.
Is that?
It was reviewed in a closed meeting,
Oh, okay.
but it also circulated to both committees
Right.
before it
Privately.
went to both of our committees before it went to council.
Okay, great. Excellent.
Mhm.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move right along. Thank you for that brief update, Maureen. So the next one is the 6.1, which is Committee of the Whole. So this was a report that I just did and was sent out this morning, a draft report. And this took the suggestions that we had from our last meeting. And the items in red, I don't know how many of you have it open, or if you want me to share screen, if that's.
Do you want me to share the screen, or do you want to share the
Sure.
screen, Robyn?
Yeah,
me to?
why don't I do it?
Okay.
Okay. You can see my messy screen here. Here, I'll move that. It's always weird to see yourself in the screen. I don't know. Okay. So what I did was take the list of items from our minutes, which was basically, so in the minutes was this one. So, we all kind of brainstormed these ideas. So I took those and just sort of reorganized them, consolidated them, attempted to sort of put them into sort of easy, medium, difficult, which I'd like us to talk about, and if that's relevant and useful. And then a couple that I was sort of like, I'm not sure if they should belong in here, but I wanted to keep them on there so we can discuss those. But I'm assuming nobody's had time to look at this because it literally went out half an hour before the meeting. So do you want me to just sort of go through it? Is that the easiest thing? And so I'm looking this way because that's where everybody's faces are. Is that the easiest thing, to maybe just go through it together and then people can just jump in if they have thoughts or comments?
Yeah, probably. Do you want us to save questions to the end or ask
No,
questions?
I think let's make this a discussion, and we've got, just to be
Okay.
mindful of time, Steph, we've got how long for this? 15 minutes. Okay.
We do,
So-
but I think it's important to
we're
get as
running
close
late.
as we can before booking a cow.
Okay. Okay. So we'll try and be, so let's keep our questions and comments concise, but yes, please do jump in as we're talking it through. So one of the things that came up, and I think we're going to talk about it today, although it's a short time to talk about it later today, but is setting housing targets. So the idea is to create targets for affordable and or diverse housing types similar to other communities. So I know Squamish, City of Vancouver, I'm sure there's likely lots more who have set these kinds of targets. So we could look at some examples and then make some recommendations, which hopefully in our whatever our 7.1 discussion today, maybe we'll come up with. Or we might just need to do a bit of research and make that. And then I didn't get around to writing a rationale for it, but hopefully that's fairly self-explanatory and we can come up with a pretty easy rationale.
Just a question.
And so, yeah, please.
Question, Robyn. How does that relate to the housing needs assessment? The housing needs assessment actually has not a staged series of targets, but it actually identifies the need for each housing type. So I think whatever we come up with here needs to take that into account. And if it's not aligned with what was stated in the housing needs assessment, we need to be able to say why it's not aligned. And
right.
And they don't. And correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody remembers this more clearly, but I don't remember the housing needs assessment saying this type of housing is more important to advance first. Is that correct? Is my memory right there?
I don't remember. Daniel, I don't know if you remember.
I know that the housing action plan piece of it did have recommendations for like specific needs. And I don't know how explicitly it links that to housing type, but I think it is there.
But yeah, agreed. I think that's a great point, Maureen. We should look at that. So in the next section, we should look at that report and look into that and use that as part of our recommendations. And like you say, if we feel strongly it should be different, give a good rationale for that. And I think the idea is to get council to, like others have, is like actually committing to those targets. And then it gives a really strong reason as to pushing forward to meet those. I think that's kind of the rationale behind it, is giving a driving force, much like I think we're probably doing. And again, I'm not that familiar with it, but probably with some of the environmental side of things with greenhouse gas emissions and all those kinds of things about setting those targets. And then it makes it really clear how we have to push ourselves to get to them. I think that's the idea, is it's creating these targets so that we can push everything to move towards those. So number 2, create more detached secondary suites. This was sort of I think a consolidation of a couple of different things, but and again, I kind of put these ones in the easy category because I feel like these are, ones that are fairly easily achievable. And what we've just talked about, reducing the lot size for detached secondary suites, existing zoning restraint. Oh yeah, so that was just an explanation. Considering it. So maybe, and we could maybe edit this to creating more secondary suites, because I feel like just the discussion that we had. And then attached, maybe it's like find a way to grandfather, or ease. I don't know. Help me out here. If you know what I'm saying, what we just discussed with Rob, which was finding a way to make the existing housing stock safe and legal. Existing stock safe and legal, something like that.
What's the list that you mentioned, Robyn, that had the smoke alarms and ceiling heights?
I'm just kind of making that up. Like I'm just remembering that from like 15 years ago in Vancouver. So I would have to go and do some research. I just remember. Yeah, I'd have to go and find it. It's more just anecdotal in my mind. I don't think I've looked at it in a long time, but I just remember, when I was working in the city of Vancouver and all that kind of stuff, when you have an old house, there was sort of just these very bare minimal requirements to sort of make it a legal suite. Okay, next one, suggestions for a housing reserve fund. Again, I think this is kind of being reiterated, but actively seek methods to build the housing reserve fund. Again, I kind of put this in the easy category. MRDT, I know I sound like a broken record. Consider, development, consider development cost charges. And I think is that, Fritz, that's kind of a point that you've brought up a few times? And I do mention it a little bit further on in one of the things, but yeah, I know it's not something that we have, and I don't know what that looks like, but so open for feedback here on this one.
Robyn,
Mm-hmm.
if that is going to, maybe some people, I like myself, would like to know, what does a development cost charge look like? So we might just need an addendum explaining what is, in other jurisdictions, a development cost charge, because it's a concept, I got to be honest, I do not understand. So if someone could put a little light on that, I'd be grateful. It may be the best thing ever, but if some explanation would help.
Yeah.
And Robyn, I was going to say, we can't have a development cost charge to fund a housing reserve fund.
Okay. See, this is important feedback. So,
what other places end up doing is almost the reverse. Like, they would have significant DCCs, and then they would waive it for affordable projects.
Okay.
And that would be funded from their housing reserve fund.
Okay. Okay. So I'll just put others for the time being. So, and I know we've brainstormed this before, so I just would have to look back through other reports to see what, but if anybody has any thoughts immediately off the top of their head, we can populate that.
The
Yeah.
The Housing Reserve Fund can receive funding. I'm losing the details here, but you can provide funding in lieu of parking.
Okay.
That wasn't very articulate. Can you expand on that?
I think, Maureen, the in lieu of parking, I think, is to go into the parking fund that can fund parking or like cycling and pedestrian improvements.
It doesn't go to housing reserve.
It doesn't go to housing reserve. With that, the in lieu would be if someone, instead of meeting the housing policy, so providing the 15% units in their development, they could instead provide cash in lieu.
Okay. Okay, so cash in lieu of meeting affordable housing policy. And that was discussed in particular where it was a small development and there wasn't a meaningful number of affordable housing units emerging from that development.
Yeah, like imagine somebody's building 3 or 4 units or something like that to then have the, I can't remember, 15% kind of bumps it up. And yeah, so that makes more sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so, Michael, to answer your question, I do mention DCC charges later on, so maybe that might be a more helpful discussion. So we'll get down there.
Thanks, Robyn.
Any other comments? And again, we can kind of look back at some other research to make some more helpful suggestions about the Housing Reserve Fund, because as Daniel thankfully pointed out, there's very, very strict guidelines as to what can fund that. So we'll have to do a bit of research on that. And then I sort of lump these into medium. And again, I'm happy for feedback on if some, need to move into easy or medium or hard or whatever, but I just sort of quickly lump them in. So changes to the land use bylaw. And this is something that Fritz and we have been talking about for a while, is making changes to land use bylaw, considering aspects of the OCP and examples from other communities to encourage more rental housing stock. So example, mostly secondary suites. So consider 2-tiered zoning, into the land to floor space ratio, establish a maximum house size, and require new builds to be suite ready. And I think kind of to Michael's point, we might need to sort of add some definitions.
Robyn, can you tell me what establish a maximum house size? Are you saying you're going to put a maximum house size anywhere throughout this island? That's going to I'm going to say that's going to set some people's hair on fire. What are we saying here?
It might. So yeah, and that is one of the proposals, and the maximum house size might be extremely large. I don't think anybody's sort of saying it should be 2,000 square feet or anything like that. But I think the main motivation, and Fritz, jump in if I've got this wrong, the main motivation is start to put limits on things. So put in a floor space ratio, put in a maximum house size, and then if people will do what we as a community would like them to do, which is build a secondary suite, build a detached secondary suite, build some rental accommodation, especially maybe it's incentivized that it's long-term rental instead of short-term rental, something along those lines, that then you allow them to build more. Like so it's sort of like restricting them and then giving them the carrot of, if you'll do this, which we think will benefit the community, you can then build more. So we'll limit you to 4,000 square feet, but if you build a secondary suite, you can build 6,000 square feet or something along those lines. That's the concept of it.
Robyn, I just don't see that as being effective.
Okay.
I mean, of course, I'm not enthusiastic about people building building monstrously big houses, but somebody who's thinking of building a 6,000 square foot home is not going to also want to add a basement suite to it.
Right.
I just think it's kind of an emotive, anti-rich sentiment that is just it's just going to cause us more problems than it's worth. And further, I think the thing about requiring new builds to be suite ready, all that does immediately is add to the cost of building a modest home to provide for a suite that one may never want to put in.
Ron,
Yes.
may I say something there? I think limiting the house sizes actually works, particularly in combination with encouraging secondary suites. And the reason is that you don't have to rent out a secondary suite. It's part of your home. And it just gives people the option to do that. In the long term, maybe more of them will be rented out. But to build it at that time, in the same square footage, but like it's already kind of divided with, let's say, a fire rating and doors. It's just set up to allow that to happen. I'm all for maximum house sizes. Also, it would be more likely that a person may want to, look at other options, like subdividing it in smaller lots, or maybe creating the duplex or the triplex. So you have to see it really in combination. So I think that item 3 that Robyn has there, that shouldn't be standalone. You really have to add to that, with permitting a conditional additional square footage to meet whatever housing objectives or something like that.
Well, it seems strange to me that the municipality would decide that at Cape Roger Curtis, the lots have to be very large, and now we would suggest that the houses could not be proportional to the lot size.
Yes.
No, but hold on a second now. The lot, the reason, everybody knows the history from Cape Roger Curtis, why those lots are so large, but it's simply because there was no other agreement reached between the municipality and the developer. I personally look at Cape Roger Curtis as a place that still has tons of potential, because these lots are large. And for instance, if you would allow on Cape Roger Curtis small clusters to be built on a small, these are 10 acres. Like for instance, if they would be allowed to use half an acre, like that is not even 10% of the lot, to build some small homes. Actually, council could just pre-zone that. They could do that now, and it would happen, because like it wouldn't even bother them. It would be right along the road, and maybe they have it starts maybe with family and friends, wherever they build for it, but it does increase the supply. So I think it's maximum house sizes is just a tool for council to take control and to have more ability to actually implement what they want.
Well, Fritz, I think you've said it is an instrument for council to take control. That is how it's going to be perceived. And whilst as someone, a civilized group like us, talking sensibly, I'm sorry that wording is inflammatory. And it's obviously targeting a group. And as it stands, I'm asking Robyn, could we please look at number 3 and see how we could reword that? Because I do not support those words, establish a maximum house size, full stop, as it stands.
Exactly.
If you're going to come up
What
with
if we
something,
do and or maximum house size, something like that? And again, I just want to be clear, these are suggestions and these are examples. I'm not saying that we're saying to council next month, please adopt all of these. It's more like, hey, we think in the next round of the land use bylaw, when you're considering them, these are things that you should take into account. And these are our recommendations based on our experience. in other municipalities and how things work. This is one way to encourage more rental housing stock. And these are some of the avenues that you can do that. I don't think we're saying absolutely do these things, because a floor space ratio might achieve the same thing as a maximum house size, right?
But
So
Robyn, I want to add something here, okay? For this is
Yeah.
important for Michael too.
Yeah.
West Vancouver has just implemented a maximum house size. The district of North Vancouver has a maximum house size. It's nothing unusual, you know? And if people, and the maximum house sizes are actually large, and yes, you can build more, you know, if you, if I say taking control, it sounds maybe a little bit harsh, but it is that it encourages, if you like that word better, homeowners to, you know, to provide more, you know, forms of housing that obviously Bowen Island municipality wants.
Well, I understand that, Fritz, but North and Vancouver, West Vancouver, the whole of the North Shore has largely or significantly been built out already. I'm just saying, surely we can avoid this pitfall by wording this differently. I have no problem with what you're discussing. I understand that. I'm asking that we do not use that term which suggests that we are going to control maximum house size, because I think the logic will get lost, and I think the spirit of it or the misunderstanding of it will get emphasized. So I'm just saying, I think it's a pitfall we can easily avoid, and I'm asking us to change the wording.
Yeah, so Michael, I think you're right there. Okay, that's true. I agree. However, more down the list, what Robyn wrote as well, is that council would implement floor space ratio. Now, floor space ratio is a normal way to set a limit of a house size. Every municipality has it. Vancouver has it, West Vancouver has it, North Shore has it, Whistler has it, it's everywhere, right? Except Bowen, you know? So I'm saying is that if people are used, if you're an architect, the first thing you look at, what is the maximum floor space ratio? What are you allowed to build? It's nothing new, right? And floor space ratios at times are lowered, but normally they're not lowered. And floor space ratio is used in exactly the same way. So the word maximum house size, I agree with you. That sounds, it's kind of negative. You know, you have to be able to phrase it in a more positive way. But floor space ratio is something that actually controls house size. If you're in the city of Vancouver, you can get 0.6 outright on your single family lot. That's 60% of your floor of your lot area. But if you want more, you can get it, but you have to do something. It's exactly the same. It's a form of amenity zoning. It's actually strange that Bowen, if you calculate out how large a house can be on Bowen Island, it's like whatever. Like Danielle, do you know if there's any limit, or can you always just work with your setbacks and your height and you get your maximum house size?
You'd hit lot coverage. So depending on the zone and the lot size, you know, it's some places hit it quite easily and some places never hit it. And like I think the Cates Hill zone has an FSR of 0.3.
And I know the small development at Foxglove Lane has an FSR.
Yeah.
So there's some pockets. Yeah.
And some, I think like Evergreen Zone has a maximum floor area that's not an FSR, but just as a number.
Yeah. So I'm loving the discussion. I'm watching the clock. I think that we're not going to get to everything on our agenda. So I'd like to keep moving through this. It's a great discussion. Maybe we can take it to email if there's some of these little word things. So like we can distribute this by, well, it's been distributed by email. So maybe if over the next week or so, people can get back to me again, Michael, if you have, if you can say, hey, let's please change this wording. Fritz, if you have other ideas. So if there's some specific things, maybe that can be done by email. I'm just looking at the rest of the agenda. I'd like to keep going on this. If everybody is okay, I think we could drop 7.1 and move that to the next meeting. And because I think that's also going to be a robust discussion. And then if we have time for the housing type targets today, otherwise that might have to be either sort of something by email, we do a bit of research and collectively to put into this report, or we move to the next meeting, because don't think we have time to get through everything. So let's keep going and see if we can get through, because we've got till, number 9. So we're on number 5. So alternative modes of land tenure. I think this one's hopefully fairly explanatory. We've talked about it before. So invite, support, facilitate, I couldn't choose a word, private property owners to apply for spot zoning or similar to accommodate a trailer park model or tiny house village, specifically a new form of land tenure and leasing pads. So it's really just, and the rationale being to eliminate the high cost of land that obstructs home stability through leasehold. Is that the right wording? And so I think hopefully that one's sort of self-explanatory. It's like just how can we allow the private market to potentially open that up. And I know it's something we've talked about before. And cluster zoning. So create a new sort of zoning type. I'm going to say new zoning type. Cluster, and we have examples. I have at least a couple of examples from Gibson's and Maple Ridge and maybe one other. So it would be, again, same thing, invite, support, facilitate, whatever that looks like, private property owners to apply for spot zoning to convert a single family home lot into one with several small houses. And the rationale is allowing for gentle density in established neighborhoods away from the Cove. And I think that's one we've talked about before. And I don't know if that's maybe that could maybe go in the easy category, because that's not a huge, challenge. So maybe I'll put it up there for the time being. Encourage attached multifamily housing forms. So private development of multifamily housing or duplex types considering EOI. So I feel like we're actually have made a step into that with this new EOI that's coming out. So we're kind of already on the way. And maybe it's, continuing to do that, or looking at how, because that site, I believe, is pre-zoned, so that's helpful. So we can maybe discuss that by email, whether that one's worth including or maybe because it's already kind of under action in action.
I think it's worth retaining it.
Okay.
Having it stated in this list.
Okay, great. So, and then this was one that came up that I thought was worth, again, I'd almost put this in the hard category if we had a hard, or difficult, sorry, that was the difficult category. So for some way to, because I think this was Ron, I just watched the meeting as I was writing this report from last meeting. I think Ron, you made this suggestion. I thought it's a great idea. I'm not sure how it could be achieved. But is there a way for the municipality to provide a person or an entity, however that looks like for support, that could sort of handhold and help people through the rezoning process and to get these desired housing types? So if somebody came in and said, I have an idea, to create, duplexes or townhouses or something, there could be some municipal support available to them. It is simply just to help guide them through it so they're not on their own trying to figure everything out. So, I mean, to a certain extent, the planning department does that. So they are there to do it. We don't necessarily want to talk about replacing them, but maybe there's, it's something enhanced, or it's something, that helps the planning department. I mean, Ron, does that kind of capture what your idea was?
I don't think it was my idea, Robyn.
Oh, it wasn't. Okay, sorry. I'm not attributing to the wrong person.
Idea,
I can't remember. It is, yeah. So if it was anybody else's idea, please jump in. But and then maybe it's, again, I'm not sure if it's allowed to be used this way, if the housing reserve fund's allowed to be used towards that. But anyways, it's just a concept of is there a way for the municipality to, in some way support a private entity to create that housing type that we want? Maybe we just don't have to be that specific at this stage, but it's just an idea. And then again, I think this would potentially be under the difficult category, but maybe it's not, as proactive rezoning, which I'm so glad it came up earlier today. So that would be the idea, is that council could identify, considering the OCP and current needs, some proactive rezoning, appropriate land for multifamily, or, maybe I should just say diverse housing types. That might be better. Diverse housing types. And then the idea is that, and please jump in because I'm not as familiar with DCC charges. So jump in, Daniel or Fritz, if you have comments on this. But the idea then is, so I'm just going to use this completely as example, and I'm not saying that this is necessarily it, but there's that series of lots that are on Miller Road. from the main trunk road where the museum is along to the new Snug Cove House, Foxglove Lane development. And I know there was one rezoning application relatively recently that's been shelved because of some servicing issues. But for example, if the municipality said, hey, that's a great place, we think there should be more density, right? Because it's right in the cove. Once the, servicing is all sorted out, it's great. That's a really good place to do it. So if they were to rezone that proactively and say, we're going to take that whole swath of land and rezone it to something new that's more dense, my understanding of how DCC charges work is that then, so if somebody has a little house there and they just want to live in their house, that's fine. They just sort of pay their taxes and they do their thing. But if and when the time comes that they want to redevelop it into something more dense, that's the opportunity then to start collecting these development cost charges. Am I using that term right? Have I got the concept correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, and then I don't know, again, I think there'd have to be a lot more details on what those development cost charges are, what they cover, what they'd go to, but it's the concept of that. So you would proactively rezone these lots. As Rob stated really clearly, that takes the uncertainty, that takes a lot of the risk out of it. They know if I buy this lot, I can build, a 3-story, this many units. So they can do their pro formas, they can get their financing in place. And then if they know what the DCC charges are going to be, they can take that into account. So if you're doing proactive rezoning, which, it already happened on that lot that's being built now, has already happened on the one that the EOI is going out on. So consider doing more of that. And then if you start doing that to say, we want to encourage these diverse family, diverse housing types, and we're going to proactively rezone. I feel like that's one tool that's relatively easy for council to do. That's, obviously not completely free because it's a lot of staff time and a lot of work, but it's not a cash outlay. You're not, outlaying cash to support things. You're just using the tools at your disposal. So is there any other thoughts or comments on that one?
Yeah, I have one thought here is that I think pre-zoning is a good thing. However, you don't want to be in your own way and pre-zone it for something that may not be, financially coming off the ground, so to speak. So I think zoning schedules can actually have, there's all kinds of things that can be embedded in zoning schedules. First of all, they can have options in it. In some cases, they say something has to be included. Other things or uses can be additional. One is for example, that there can be a component of commercial in it, but there's a limit. And then if you put on floor space, again, Michael, this is also an example of how you can use floor space ratios to kind of get what you want. Because it may say that you get a higher floor space ratio if you include residential, or for instance, if you have rental housing. So like and it's not uncommon at all. So like there's kind of formulas that sit in the zoning schedule that relate to the objectives that the community has. And so zoning can, like, for instance, if you have a parcel on Miller Road, it may say you can have so much commercial, you can have so much residential, but if you don't put in one, you don't get the other or so. All those things are, we can maybe find some examples for that.
Great. Okay, so I think we're pretty much out of time. So if everyone's okay, I'll resend this out with a couple of the different comments that we've had. And so if people can, Steph, I can't remember what the timeline is to get that report to a pretty good stage that it has to go before the COW meeting.
That was my note to ask you about a deadline for comments and just to get confirmation from the committee what kind of date we're looking for polling council for the COW.
So I would think we need at least a week to get some comments back and then a few days for me to sort of summarize those and get those back to you. So if I'm looking at
so we can say the 7th September 17th for comments, which is a Friday. And
or
then,
if people want the extra weekend, we could make it the 20th. I don't think that really matters to
so
anybody.
Monday the 20th. And then can you implement by?
I could do it by, say, the end of that week, so the 24th.
So Friday the 24th.
We could have let's call it the final report ready to go.
Final draft for the final report, okay.
And then So I guess
So then my
that's
staff
two.
reports are due on Monday. I'm thinking regular council.
Okay,
So
yeah, so,
Cal, like middle of, like the first week of October. I'm looking to councillors, Kill and Nicholson for that.
I guess, I mean, Steph, then I guess timing wise would be like, I wonder if there's time before the council meeting on the 12th of October.
Oh, to have it on the same day.
Like that's sometimes
course.
the easiest way to schedule.
Yeah,
them,
sure. Okay.
Previous to that council.
And that we're in time for that. Do councillors feel like that's a good opportunity for Cal? Tuesday, October 12th for the regular council meeting.
I think we could ask for it and see what the response is.
Yeah,
So they're an
I'm
after.
good. If you could avoid the afternoon of the 12th, I for one would be grateful, because Monday's events owing to Thanksgiving have been moved. Canadian Thanksgiving has been moved to a Tuesday, and we've got that regular council meetings as a hangover almost from a long time without a meetings. I something else is likely to crop up before that. I would avoid that afternoon. I think that's going to be difficult.
Okay, so we'll pull for just sometime that week and the week after.
yeah, I think that's reasonable. We can leave it open and let council figure it
Maybe
out.
see what else Hope is having to fit in there, because my expectation is there's a bundle of things that are going to require attention.
Okay, I do, my conversations with Hope is she's looking for a little more specificity from this group. So that's why I'm trying to kind of come back with something fairly concrete, but if we can't do that, I can work it out with her.
Yeah, so if we can say our report will
Between
be
the
ready
12th
by the
and
24th.
21st.
Yeah, our report will be
Okay.
ready for the 24th.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. All right, we're pretty much out of time. So I would like to hear maybe from Maureen very quickly about the conversation with BC Housing yesterday, and then we'll just have to push unfortunately, 7.1 is 7.2 to the next meeting. If everyone's okay with that. And, but Maureen, how did the conversation go yesterday?
It was a good conversation. So it was a conference call as part of the Union of BC Municipalities batch of meetings that council usually has at this time of year. So we met with a representative from the ministry, an assistant, and James Forsyth from BC Housing. And on the council side, myself, David Hawking, Sue Ellen, and the mayor, and Liam Edwards. So what we did was we brought up the point that Minister Eby himself had in a recent conversation identified some of the unique challenges that Bowen faces in terms of meeting housing needs, and he did that unprompted. So bringing that up again when BC Housing was there, we felt was a wise thing to do. We gave them a bit of a recap brief of the findings of the housing needs assessment. We talked about 4 projects that are underway, so they were either reminded or informed. The success story of the rental building and how that has unfolded, how many units will be available, what the municipal participation was, who the developer was. She talked about Snug Cove House. Snug Cove House submitted an application yesterday to the Housing Hub funding program for construction, a low interest construction loan. And we filled them in on what that would deliver to the community, 24 independent living homes. We brought up the Birch project, and one of the points that was stressed at least twice in the conversation is that it's extremely difficult for small communities like Bowen Island to compete in competitions that pull in applications from throughout the province, and that it might be wise for BC Housing to consider implementing a small communities funding stream for housing in places like Bowen. I'll come back to that in a moment. And then the fourth thing was we mentioned the expression of interest and how we were approaching trying to foster additional housing projects on island. So with the application to the Community Housing Fund, which is what Birch made, the feedback from BC Housing is that for their next call, they're going to be, they expect that they will be honing their evaluation criteria. And they will be, they didn't come right out and say that they would put in place a small communities stream, but they said that they were hearing very similar things in a number of meetings that they had to date. So the criteria that would be used in subsequent adjudications of that fund or something similar would be different from what you were confronted with for the last competition, which you weren't successful with the Birch application. They also advised Snug Cove House to be looking at the National Housing Strategy Co-Investment Fund. So that's information I'll pass on to Snug Cove House. Were you also looking at that, Robyn?
Yeah, that's actually our next step, is working with them to see if they'll be willing to, if they're a willing partner.
Yeah. So it was a good meeting. It was a congenial and open discussion that we had. They listened. We'll see what happens.
Great, thank you for that.
Mhm.
Excellent. Okay, well, that's our time, everybody. Sorry we didn't get through the whole agenda, but I do think, especially our time with Rob was really good, and then our discussion of our report, which I think is an important one to keep going, especially to, it's nice for us to be a committee and everything, and I'm sure council does look at our minutes and everything, but I think it's actually a really important thing for us to be, doing these reports and going before council and bringing these issues really to their awareness, and hopefully if at a COW having a really good discussion about it and helping them to inform for next steps. So I hope everybody's okay that we took a bit of extra time on that, and we'll just move the next things to the next agenda. So we'll circulate that. So if everybody's got a little over a week to give comments on that report and send them back to me. And if you can, when you're using Word, if you can kind of put it in like the track changes, that's helpful. But if not, just maybe highlight in different colors or give me written comments in point form. That's fine as well. So, and I'll collate it.
So did you guys want to meet in that first week of October as a committee, or just the COW would be the next point of contact?
I think we should keep going with our committee meetings, because we have,
Okay.
like say, we bumped a couple of things now, and
Sure.
we've got other stuff we want to get through in the months, using them as working sessions. So
Okay,
if the
so I'll
Friday,
pull for the first week. Oh,
well, if we're all here, does that either October 1st or October 8th in the morning, right? And maybe not the 8th, because that's the long weekend. So maybe October 1st.
October
Is that what we're
1st,
talking?
9:30, Friday.
That's I can't help you on the 1st. I can on the 8th. Okay, on the 15th, but
Does the 8th work for people? I'm certainly not going anywhere. So
It's okay
Yes,
with me. I'm
no.
around.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's aim for the 8th at 9:30, and then if it comes up that doesn't work, we can
Okay.
grant
Okay,
it.
I'll send that now.
8th at 9:30. Excellent, thanks
And then are
everybody.
you okay if I run it till 11:30? Can people handle 2 hours if we schedule 2 hours?
That should be fine by me, and then hopefully we can finish earlier than that, but
Okay.
if that's okay.
Great.
Should we try to contact another developer to have
Oh,
like
yeah.
another presentation?
I think we should. Yeah,
So we have a list. Anyone remember? I can access it and find out who was number 2.
Yeah. If we can handle that offline, we can do that by email and
Yeah.
figure out who the next person should be. Yeah,
all right.
awesome. Okay, so I'll consider the meeting closed. 11:04, not too bad. Okay, thanks everybody.
Well done.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Yeah.